Um, so first off, what is Bitcoin? Is it a coin? No. Is it a commodity? Is it like gold or oil? No. So what is it? It's a consensual fantasy. We have a consensus that it is a fantasy that is no different than this. This piece of paper is not a coin. It's not like got a bit of gold on it that you can go take to the jeweler and go make a gold ring out of. It is not a barrel of oil. It's worth a fraction of a penny in actual wood pulp. Both are a consensual reality. This paper is currency because someone stands behind it. In fact, we all stand behind it as a community, a consensus of people who decided to believe in it. It's because we gathered together as citizens of the United States in 1776. We needed something to represent and become a shared value that we all can do. Bits became currency because someone bought a pizza. So on May 22nd, 2010, just a little over 5 years ago, somebody said, I will buy a pizza from you, and I will give you 10,000 Bitcoins. And somebody said, sure, I don't know what a Bitcoin's worth, but why not? Today, those Bitcoins are worth $2.2 million. He held on to them. So, a community, a consensus of people came to believe in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin has been a currency ever since. So this is its value of, one pizza. And then we had a kind of a weird explosion of interest last year that was speculative boom. And now we're kind of at this is back at the beginning of the year. We're kind of on track. It's been relatively stable for the last 6 months, which I like. So why is this important? Well, because before currencies, ancient cultures could only barter. I'm sure if you took basic economics. But there's problems with barter. Barter only works if someone wants your goods, right? You come to them, I've got apples. Well, I've got apples too. What currency did was allowed us to trade across time and distance. So in North America, even though these shells came from the Gulf of Mexico, you could get them and see them all the way up in the Seattle area. Okay? This became something that allowed people to trade. In the Mediterranean, these go back, 7,000 years for the cowrie shell as a currency? Not particularly. It's not a commodity. It's not like super beautiful. I mean, it's kind of pretty, but it's not super beautiful. What they had going for them was that they were hard to obtain or duplicate. So these shells only came from a small area. These shells only so many grew a year. So Bitcoin's kind of like that in the sense that Bitcoin is hard to duplicate. It's hard to make it. You know why? Because it has a secret. There is no such thing as Bitcoin. Okay? Everything you think about currency as far as it being this dollar bill, this coin, or this gold brick that I moved from one room in Fort Knox to another room in Fort Knox isn't true for Bitcoin. There are no Bitcoins. Because Bitcoin is really only a ledger. It's a very fancy, sophisticated, computerized ledger, but it is a ledger. And ledger technology is old. I mean, we've got these old ledgers from the Roman times. We've got old ledgers in Egypt, and they go all the way back to these basic pieces of clay where somebody basically punched in the clay. This is how many baskets of wheat with a little wheat symbol. They went wheat, 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 let it dry, and then basically said, this is worth 100 baskets of wheat. Here. When you give it back to me, I'll give you 100 baskets of wheat. But the real magic was in the 14th century. This guy, Luca Pacioli, invented double entry accounting. Now, how many people learn basic bookkeeping or accounting? Almost everybody. So the key to double entry accounting is you have debits, or, debits on the left, credits on the right? That's kind of the rule for everything. You have this T, and they always have to equal 0. Well, invented in 2008 is the blockchain ledger. We have an account, a debit, and a credit to another account. Every one of these is a debit and a credit to another account. So what this means is that bitcoins don't exist because they are just a balance. They don't move around, balances go up and down. In a ledger, all debits must equal credits. So minus 25 goes to a plus 25. A minus 100 gets split into 70 and a 30. It all must balance. So if everything must balance, then where does the first credit come from? It's a hard problem, right? You got this ledger and it's got zeros all over the place. And how do you move a 0 to a 0? Well, the way they did this is they created a Tetris-like game. How many people have played Tetris? Okay, so what you're doing is the bricks are coming down and they're coming down really fast, and then basically you're trying to pump them into the hole as efficiently as possible until you can perfectly finish the box, right? Well, it's basically what a miner does, except they're taking tens of thousands of transactions and they're doing puzzle math on it, and they've got to get it into a very precise box. Okay? And there's a winner of this puzzle every 10 minutes. So the winner goes, I filled the box first, and he can prove it to everybody else, and the winner basically gets 25 points. Magic on the only magic point in the ledger is that 25 points. And from there, he can then use that to seed off to other people so that people can have debits and credits and debits and credits. So later we'll show you how you can look at any transaction on the blockchain and you can walk it back and ultimately find the person who got 25 bitcoins for successfully mining something. Now, why 10 minutes? Well, the consensus said 10 minutes is good enough. The consensus can change that in the future, but right now it's 10 minutes. But what happens if we become smarter? What happens if our Tetris game, we're getting really good at this Tetris game, and then I go put some chips on it and I get NVIDIA to let me do it with video hardware. Oh, well, that's, now I'm just going to make my own chips, and I'm going to make that even faster. So we've gotten really, really good chips to do this crazy puzzle. I mean, the puzzle has no value other than the fact that it's a puzzle. So the puzzle gets harder every 2 weeks. It basically looks at, gosh, a whole bunch of people solved it, and it took 9 minutes. Well, we're just going to have to make it 10% harder. Okay? So, why is this useful? The reason why this is useful is this game incentivizes 56,098 players to keep fair copies of this ledger. Every other ledger form in the past required somebody to say, this is the master ledger. There are no double books. There isn't somebody else. This is the master ledger. Everything points to here. That gave people control, whether or not it was a bank or a government or anything. It also wasn't very resilient. The bank could burn down. There could be other different kinds of games that were played. You know, somebody could write things in invisible ink that disappeared. There's all kinds of weird things that, you know, if you look at the history of ledgers. Well, because there are close to 6,000 of these things, and they're accurate every 10 minutes, because that's part of how you play the game. Because basically you're taking all those transactions, and when you're putting them in the box, you're kind of putting a lock on that box at that particular point, and boom, everybody has the same box. We've reached a consensus. I'm going to use this word a lot. Consensus is really the magic of this. And it's redundantly all over the world. So yeah, 2,100 of the nodes are in the United States, but I can show you a map. I think it's bitnodes.com that will show you where all the nodes are, and there's, you know, they're in all kinds of parts of Africa. I haven't seen one in Mongolia yet, but you know, I'm sure that it will be soon. So because of this redundancy, because of the nature that anybody can play this game, there is no center. No one controls them. There is no one ring rule them all. Now, it has some pros and cons too, but the pros outweigh the cons. Because we've achieved a consensus about a consensual currency where no one can cheat and everyone can participate. I can do it on my iPhone. I can do it on a little tiny, what was that little tiny computer that you...
Entropy.
Entropy. So it's just like a little USB key. Now, the blockchain is not only for Bitcoin. This power of consensus that we have can be used for a lot of other things that need consensus, like self-auditing of books. Okay? You can actually set it up so you don't have to audit, because the very nature of putting it in the book means it's audited. Cool. Might put some auditors out of business, but it's possible. We can do things with other kinds of assets. We can have these counterparty assets, or you know, that are connected to a stock. I can even make that stock actually have voting power. I can make that stock actually represent your interests. You don't have to go through this proxy. You can go directly. You know, have your opinion known as a shareholder of a company. You can use it for commodities, all kinds of interesting financial instruments and insurance. Something I'm passionate about is something called smart contracts, which is, can we find new ways to work together? I would like to be able to form a partnership with you, where you and I are going to create something amazing. We're going to do it in 6 weeks. And when we're done, just like Hollywood, you go off and do what you're interested in, and I go off and what I'm interested in. Meanwhile, if the product people like, the money goes in, and the smart contract says, oh, she gets half, I get half. I don't have to worry about it. It'll just happen. That's possible with the smart contract. We can do what Hollywood does with a whole bunch of unions and a whole bunch of friction and all this kind of stuff, to have these dynamic teams, create things, do something, do it great, let the market decide if it's valuable, but then you can go on to the next thing. You don't have to be there to kind of like, okay, are people paying yet? These consensus techniques can be used for a lot more things, and that's part of our goal of the course, to try to stretch your mind as to what those things are. I came up with something that I'd never thought of before, that solved an old problem that's been plaguing me for 20 years. Just sitting here in this class, a month ago. And wow, this solves a real problem. And there are now people basically going, yeah, you know, that might actually be really worthwhile, and let's do it. So Bitcoin is only the first app of the blockchain. And if Bitcoin for some reason fails, and it could, we can talk about different scenarios of what the future is for Bitcoin over the next 30 years. Doesn't matter. What's significant is we've got this wonderful new technique for achieving consensus and things on it. So I'm going to go back. I talked about blockchain. I'm going to go back to Bitcoin. So I'm going to close off with this analogy because I find that this will really help you when you're thinking about Bitcoin, which is what we're going to start with this afternoon. What you're going to be presenting, he's going to go into kind of sort of the technical details, and we're hopefully during, before we go into this afternoon, we're actually going to set up your computer so you can actually do a few of these things. But this analogy I find powerful. So Bitcoin is kind of like a bank of lockers. It's like this bank of lockers. So what's interesting about this bank of lockers is that it has an identifying number. It has a slot that I can basically just put money into, right? It has a window so I can see, oh, how much money is inside. And it has a lock on it that requires a key. So these lockers are secure. The windows are unbreakable, the metal can't be cut, all the lockers are bolted to the ground, and there is almost an infinite number of lockers. I can give a locker to about 2/3 of the atoms of the visible universe. It's a lot of lockers. The lockers are in a public place. Everybody can see them. Anybody can see what's inside any locker. All the windows are visible. Anyone can put money in the locker. Anybody can see the identifying numbers, but they don't know who has the key that unlocks them. Another important principle is each locker is free of charge. Anyone may claim an unused locker for which they get that key, right? You can have as many lockers as you want. This is like one of the big differences from the old days of the crypto that I did for SSL, where crypto was hard and you might have one key, and you went, I don't want to make 10 keys. That's annoying. Well, hundreds of keys get made because they're easy, they're cheap, and they're unforgeable. I can't, there's no way to fake a key. It's a difficult mathematical problem that we have no answers for. You may only open the locker with the key. Once you open the locker, you take your money out, and because there's an infinite number of these things, you throw away the key. Once you open it, you can theoretically reuse it. But that's one of the other cool things about Bitcoin, is they basically decided there's so many, throw out the key, because there's a slight risk. When I open up this locker now, for a very brief moment of time, there's a possibility that somebody can, take advantage of things while I've got that locker open. So, I want to make that as small a window as possible. I don't want to come back to that same locker multiple times and make the same mistake, but I'm always using my right hand for it when maybe I should sometimes be using my left. And somebody figures out there's a way during that little tiny time to do things. Okay? It is important, though, if you lose the key, the money is locked away forever. Which is one of the reasons why we have wallets. So what wallets are is a place to store lots of our keys. And we're going to talk later about all the different ways you can store stuff on wallets. Your wallet can be on a piece of paper. I can store it in my safe deposit box. It can be in my head, is what is known as a brain wallet. There's a couple of variants, these things called deterministic wallets, that I can basically transport from one place to another. I can trust someone else to hold my wallet for me because, I might want my wife to have it should I pass on, and my brain wallet is now dead. So if you lose the key, the money is locked away forever. So, a couple other things. Transactions can be done without people meeting in person. So, you basically say, Chris, I want to buy a pizza from you. And what you do is I say, oh, well, my locker is 25. And then you kind of, while nobody's looking, stick 25, $5, or I'll accept 10,000 Bitcoins into that locker. I basically look in the locker and say, oh yeah, there are now 10,000 Bitcoins in there. You've paid for your pizza. Deliver your pizza, I take the money. Very straightforward. Interesting about this, there are no banks, there are no governments involved. There is something that most people do forget about Bitcoin, is that anyone peeking can know that the transaction was made. I can go back, we can walk back through the transaction ledger, and I can show you that 10,000 Bitcoin transfer that was done in May 22nd of 2010. I can tell you what address. Can't tell you who belongs to that address, though. So, as of today, or as of last night, Bitcoins in these lockers are worth $3,373,000. So that's a decent market cap. Apple's bigger, but it shows the promise. Today, just during the course of this day, over 130,000 lockers will transfer money. And there'll be 130,000 keys thrown away. And there are 5,687, as of last night, people guarding these lockers to make sure that you, and you, and you, and you, and you don't cheat. So this is the Bitcoin app on the blockchain. So that's kind of the framework I'd like you to think about these as we go along. I want to say a little bit about, not all of you feel confident about your tech skills. Okay? We're going to try to keep things to something called JavaScript, which is a relatively easy language. And many of these scripts that we're going to show you are pretty straightforward. There isn't a whole lot of JavaScript promises or other different kinds of weird JavaScript stuff in them. It's just basically do this, do this, do this, do this in an order. Also, there are lots of different little simple things that are recipes that you can use. So we're going to give you some little recipes, and you can maybe combine things a little bit. And if you get stuck, you say, I put this with this, and I thought it was going to do this. What am I missing? There are people here who can help you with those. So I do encourage you to try to do a little bit of the JavaScript. It'll be worth your while. It'll also help you to learn just a little bit about the terminal, and everybody here is going to basically use a little bit of GitHub. You may never use GitHub again, but it's really helpful because GitHub's kind of interesting, and that's maybe a clue into the future of how we're going to be working together in the future. I mean, it's clunky, it's kind of techy and nerdy. On the other hand, we have 20,000 people who contribute to the Linux project, something like that work together and create a consensus together to build something amazing. Okay, what if PricewaterhouseCoopers could do the same? To have that kind of efficiency of creation and checks and balances and all that type of stuff. So it's worth your while to learn a little bit about GitHub and about what's going on there. We're hoping everybody is involved in a project by the end of the week, end of the month. They don't all have to be tech projects. So Jesse and I, Jesse's an attorney in Oakland, kind of realized, there's some real interesting legal problems if you want to start running your company using some of this new technology and new ways of doing things. Darn LLC agreements, it's like every attorney has to write up their own. You go to one attorney firm, they've got their version of it, somebody else, it's the other. They're all 90% alike. And most of the stuff that's left is not really that different. So what we're doing is we're going to put an LLC agreement onto GitHub. We're going to sign it with some blockchain technologies, but that's just because. But we're going to basically make some changes to it that basically these are our opinionated ideas about what you need to change in an LLC if you want to run your company using Bitcoin technologies. That there's certain language and other different stuff that there's no legal reason why in an LLC you can't say we're going to do it this way rather than the old way of doing things. I don't have to send a legal notice and wait 30 days for the for the stockholders to all reply when I can prove using the blockchain that they have received it, right? So let's eliminate that and do it in a smart way. So our project is basically just to share these agreements and encourage other people to maybe add some things to the pie. So we have somebody else who's going, gosh, that might be good for a nonprofit. So we're going to try to talk her into putting in a nonprofit. So even if you aren't doing a tech project, some code, let's take something in your own area. If you're doing international taxes, we're going to introduce you to some interesting differences around different nations and how they're currently regulating Bitcoin. Maybe you have an insight on that we don't, and let's just share that. So, be broad-minded about your ideas on projects.